Glass, the mayor of Petaluma, and it's nice to be with you today. We're at the Veterans Building in Petaluma on Petaluma Boulevard, and with us is James Poore, retired lieutenant colonel and an aviator. And which branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Air Force for 25 years. There I served virtually all over the world, mostly flying transport airplanes, but then later on I was in Vietnam, where I served on the MACV staff, and also came back with the Air Force Inspector General, and then was manager of what's called the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, and then spent a couple of years at the Pentagon, and then I retired.
Lieutenant Colonel, that's a very high rank in the Air Force because that's a hands-on occupation when you're an aviator, and so quite often you're commanding missions at the Lieutenant Colonel rank?
Yeah. Basically, the way we fly in the transports, it's similar to what the airlines would fly. Basically, we'll have a crew, and we'll have an aircraft commander and a basic crew, and then we'll, take on whatever the mission calls for. And basically, I was stationed at Hickam in Honolulu, and we flew all over the South Pacific and into Southeast Asia, and into Japan as well. And we actually had missions clear as far as Europe and Greece and Germany. So it was all over.
So did you work on transporting troops and moving them around for logistics?
Yes, troops and equipment. And we did airdrop. We delivered things with parachutes from the air. And so it was an exciting experience.
What would you find when you were bringing troops to a combat zone, and what would you find on that airplane in terms of attitude if you were bringing troops home? How was the dynamic different?
Well, going, of course, the troops were somewhat anxious because they were going into an element of an experience that they had no previous idea of what it was going to be like. Coming home, usually it was much more relaxed and enjoyable for them. We did fly, and many of the C-141 missions that I flew, we were reconfigured, and we flew medevac coming back from Vietnam. Usually we'd come back through Japan, through Yokota Air Force Base, and then into either Travis here in Fairfield, or McCord up in near Seattle in Tacoma. So and it was helpful in the fact that many of these troops coming back were in very desperate circumstances, but we tried to give them the best care we could in flight. As a matter of fact, we carried nurses and med technicians, and occasionally if we had somebody that was really ill, we'd carry a flight surgeon or a doctor. And we tried to give them the same level of care in the air that they would receive in a hospital. So that was always a very emotionally rewarding experience.
So when you would do that, you're flying hospital operating room, perhaps, although maybe you can't do operations, but it's a lot of prep work and monitoring and life support.
Yes, absolutely. Part of the problem, of course, is you have to be aware. At altitude, of course, it's a very dry atmosphere, and so you have to make sure that the wounds are moistened and are taken care of. And so the nurses and the med techs, they were very attentive throughout the entire flight. Usually out of Vietnam, it would be maybe a 5 to 6 hour flight into Japan, and then coming back from Japan nonstop into the U.S., into Travis, for example, it was usually about a 10 or a half hour flight.
On commercial airlines, because my brothers both did that, and so I know that when you fly, for instance, the Orient, and it would be a long flight, there would be an extra person in the cockpit, and they'd rotate a shift off. Yeah. What about military purposes? Did you ever have the luxury of an extra person in the cockpit? Occasionally
we would. It would depend on the type of mission we were flying. Occasionally we'd carry an extra pilot and an extra flight engineer, and sometimes an extra navigator. Back in the days, we used navigators, there we could extend. Normally, our normal crew duty day from the time we actually our crew duty day started from the time we showed up at the operations center until we blocked in at the end of the flight was 18 hours. And when we had what we called an augmented crew that I just described, then we could go up to 24 hours, nonstop.
And everything in the world is happening when you're coming in on landing, and it happens in a very compressed period of time. It must be somewhat challenging to land a plane 18, 24 hours into a shift and not have had any rest.
Yeah, well, we trade off while we're in flight. So, yeah, most of the time, we're glad to get back on the ground. We'll put it that way. And sometimes the landing might not be as smooth as one would hope, but at least you're on the ground and nothing is seriously broken at that point.
Lieutenant Colonel rank, that means you spent a good deal of time in the military. How many years?
25 years.
And when you started, tell us about that process. How did you get the background and education to get into flight school and go through that path?
Well, I'm a graduate of Chico State. I was in the first class of engineers to graduate from Chico State. And later on, I went into the Air Force, of course, as an enlisted man. We didn't have ROTC there. So I went in as an enlisted into flight school and got my commission as an aviation cadet and my aeronautical rating at the same time. Then later on, they asked me if I would like to, become a regular officer. You graduate as a reservist, and I became a regular officer, and that's what I was through the remainder of my career. I spent a lot of time. I flew out of Hickam for about 4 years during the early '60s, where we flew many support missions in and out of Vietnam. And then we also developed our skills, training ourselves to lead aeronautical deployment missions where we'd be dropping troops and equipment out of the airplane with parachutes. And that was a challenge. Then later on, I went to Airlift Command Headquarters, where I was in plans for 4 years, and then I took command of a small detachment at McCord, where I was the commander, but I also flew the C-141 for 3 years there, and then I was assigned to Vietnam as an advisor to the South Vietnamese. And then about 6 months into my 1-year tour there, I was transferred to Headquarters of Military Assistance Command Vietnam, where I was in operations in J3. And there I had to was working with the Vietnamese Joint General Staff and helping them address some of their equipping issues and things of that nature.
What about your personal life? Are you married? Do you have a family?
Yes, I'm married. I have a son. He lives in Riverside, California, and we've been married for over 30 years now. So, yeah, I live in Sonoma. We've been living there since 1998, and we moved there, and then I started my own company there. While I was with Bank of America after I retired for about 10 years, and while I was with Bank of America, I went back to school under the GI Bill and obtained a PhD in business administration. So that was when I decided to start my own company.
So married and family came after the Vietnam experience?
Yes.
How difficult was it on the people that had families back home, your co-workers, when they were going through that experience?
It was very difficult, and many of the people, when they came home, the family broke up. They were unable to maintain the same relationships, and that's one of the concerns we have with the troops coming back now. As a matter of fact, is that what happens, and what we try to tell the troops in advance, that your life is never going to be the same. Tell the troops and the families, because once the troop is deployed, then the family dynamic changes. The wife or the other spouse, the spouse remaining home, assumes all of the responsibilities of the home life, and the children, and raising the children, make sure they're taken care of and raised. And so, and when the soldier returns from his deployment, then he's not going to step back into the same set of circumstances that existed when he left. And sometimes it's very difficult. And so as a result, we have a lot of divorce, probably more so than average.
There's Thomas Wolfe, I think it was, wrote, you can't go home again. You can go back to the same physical presence, but nothing is as you left it. And that really is the challenge, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
So as we look at the experience of Vietnam, unlike other wars that this country has been involved in, you had a whole generation that went off to war, and when they came home, the homecoming was less than what you would want to experience or see.
Absolutely. I'm a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the Vietnam Veterans of America. And in both cases, we've vowed that the veterans coming back would not receive the same kind of treatment. We would make sure that they were brought back and accorded the credit that they deserve and the treatment that they deserve, having served as veterans and as dependents and as people who have devoted a portion of their life to helping this country.
So when you get an organization like Vet Connect, and that's what you're working on now as a volunteer, how many volunteers are involved in this effort?
We have about 30 volunteers right now. We have actually Vet Connect started in 2008. It was an offshoot of the County Continuum of Care Subcommittee on Homeless Veterans. And they were trying to reach out to the homeless veterans and find out what their problems were in obtaining their benefits. And so the result of that was after they brought some veterans in and asked them, what do you need to improve your life? One of which was, well, we need to know what our benefits are. And secondly, we need to know how to access those benefits. And we need help in accessing those benefits. The help being that many of the homeless veterans, for example, don't have transportation. So what was done then was we created a one-stop shop where we bring in the providers of veterans benefits to one location, and a veteran can walk in, and because we're all volunteers. Vet Connect, we have no paid staff. We're all veterans, so they'll come in, we'll be interviewed by a veteran. We find that that's a very successful access because a veteran feels more comfortable talking to another veteran because of there's an empathy that's involved there. And so most of them are very comfortable coming in and talking to us, and everything they tell us is in confidence. And we make sure that we sign an oath that anything a veteran tells us will be held in strict confidence. We'll interview them and help them. In some cases, they'll not know what kind of benefits are available. So we'll sit with them and talk to them for a while and just essentially let them talk. Tell us what their situation is, what their issues are, and then we'll start talking to them about, well, you may be eligible for certain benefits. And then we don't profess to be experts in those types of things. What we'll do is, this is the person you need to go talk to. Many veterans have never applied for the medical benefits that are available through the VA. And as a matter of fact, of the 22 million veterans in the U.S. right now, only about 7.5 million have actually gone in and signed up for VA medical benefits. And I can say this, the medical benefits from the VA had a bad rap for a long time. That's improved dramatically. For example, we call it Fort Miley. It's the San Francisco, let's see, I'm going to screw up the name bigger than life, but anyway, it's the medical center in San Francisco. It's on Clement Street, and they affiliate with the UC San Francisco. So you can see people walking around in white smocks with UC San Francisco on the label, or Veterans Medical Center San Francisco, either one. And the level of care is identical. So you can imagine that any veteran should be eligible to receive these types of care, and that's what we want to try to make sure they do. There are some limitations. Some of it is income delineated. So you know, but we encourage all veterans to sign up because you never know, at some point in your life you're going to need it.
I was talking to my brother the other day, and he's a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
And he has said that one thing that, he was shocked to find out was the scope of benefits, at least in some cases, for Vietnam veterans have been expanded to the point that if you set ground on the turf in Vietnam for much as one day, at one moment in time, you qualified for at least the portion of benefits for veterans on medical that he was talking about. And that's a significant expanding of the scope of those that are eligible. Yeah. So people may not think they qualify because they think they weren't there long enough. If they were there at all, at least for some, they qualify.
If you set foot in Vietnam, you're eligible for Agent Orange. You're presumed to have been exposed to Agent Orange. Incidentally, if you don't mind, here's Hether Dunn. She is from the VA Medical Clinic here in Santa Rosa, and she participates. Come in here, Hether. She is a social worker there, and she works directly with our veterans who are coming in seeking medical care. She also we're working on trying to house the homeless veterans. And we've got a big program coming up to be kicking off the 1st of September, where we're trying to be, our objective is to house up to 900 veterans and their dependents by the end of 2015.
Hether, tell us about that program.
The campaign that we have started is 100 days. And basically in this next 100 days, when did we start? The end of
in July.
Yeah, or the beginning of July. So the next 100 days, we are trying to build a machine, per se, to help continue to house 30 veterans a month.
That's on a countywide basis.
A countywide basis, correct. And so we are, the machine, that we're talking about, and we just use that as a metaphor, is using all of our community partners and people out in the community, landlords, nonprofits that, work with our veterans. We're trying to identify more housing options that we haven't been able to identify, so that we have like this base of resources that we can tap into and expand, improve how fast we are housing. And we're talking about permanent housing of these veterans. And so I think our goal is to have started housing 30 veterans a month by the end of September. And so when we started, we were housing 11 a month. So this is a big deal. It's huge. And so now we're trying to build it, and we have been housing more. And then by the end of September, housing 30 veterans a month till the end of 2015. And our goal is, to end homelessness, veteran homelessness.
All right. Now, you mentioned you have a PhD. You mentioned you worked in banking, so you understand finance. So what kind of commitment is it going to take financially to get this job done?
It's going to be fairly substantial, as you can imagine. It'll be, we hope that we can get some augmentation from the VA and others. One of the things we're doing, as you can imagine, many of the veterans that will be housing, some of them have been chronically homeless for a long time, and some of them we're creating along with it what we call a navigator program. Essentially, it's a group of veterans who, let me back up a little bit and describe the HUD-VASH program. Hether has been involved in that as well. HUD-VASH is a program where the VA, it's an agreement between Housing and Urban Development and the Veterans Affairs, where the VA will subsidize rent and utilities for veterans to assist them getting into permanent housing. And that program's been going on for a couple of years now, and essentially we've housed about 200 veterans and their dependents.
Does that program, is it structured similarly to HUD, which will contract out with individual property owners and then pick up the market rate rent, but the occupant of the home pays on a means-tested scale?
Yes, it is. It's the VA partnering with HUD. So HUD is a partner with us. So there's HUD providing the rental assistance like you just described, and then the VA providing social work, case management, intensive case management services to our veterans to make sure that they're successfully housed. It's not just about housing them, it's making sure that they're successfully housed. So once they're in a house, you know, a lot of issues might come up that the VA will come in and address and try to work with the veteran. And if it's with the landlord or, you know, people out in the complex, then, you know, we're going to try to, you know, we try to identify that and really get some wraparound services to maintain that housing.
So this can be something that is very beneficial not only for the veteran, because it'll give stability to the veteran, but for someone that's looking to rent out a property and wants stability and doesn't want to have to keep releasing that property or worrying about collecting the rent. Through the HUD program, rents are guaranteed, and so the problem is not one of the landlord, and it gives a lot of stability for the property owner as well.
It's a nice program because unlike HUD that just provides the the financial assistance, we provide somebody for the landlords to come to. We're on board with the landlords. The landlords can call the social worker directly with any issues or concerns, or if they haven't paid their portion of the rent, calling us. And so we're like this go-between to make sure that it's more successful.
Okay, so this is the point where we put in the phone number and the website and the contact information and everything. Do you know that off the top of your head?
I don't. It's in my bag over there.
Why don't you go and take a look in your bag and come back with that information, because people are going to want that. Okay, so I'm going to talk to the Colonel a little bit while Heather does that.
One thing I'm going to add to that, I mentioned that we've housed, or they've housed. I'm a active participant, but I'm not the pusher and shover in this one. They've only had about 5 defaults out of the 200, more than 200. So I would say the program itself is very successful, particularly from a landlord's point of view. If you have that few difficulties, then and you can imagine. And this is what I talk about the Navigator program. Initially, we're just training 5 individuals who have been through the HUD-VASH program, and all we want them to do is simply to help the new veteran moving in to understand their responsibilities, make sure that they get there, that they pay their rent, that they act as a liaison with the landlord, and also, and we want them to feel comfortable doing that. So what we're trying to do is collect donations to fund gas cards for these navigators. Like I say, we're only talking about 5 of them, 5 right now, but as you can imagine, as the program expands, we're going to have more and more. Right now, we're looking for a maximum, initially of $3,000, and of that we've collected about $1,500. So we're open to more donations at any time, and we are 501c3. The donation should be made out to Sonoma County Vet Connect, Sonoma County Vet Connect. And we are 501c3, so it'll be a tax-deductible donation.
And we're going to put up, credits. Kaye's very good about that. So at the end, you provide that, and Kaye will do her magic before this hits the air, and people will know where to go and all of that. So you have the contact information.
I do. You need to contact Kim Valadez, and her office number is 707-569-2390. She is the coordinator of the HUD-VASH program here in northern area, Bay Area.
Okay, so once you have a quality housing accommodation for a veteran, a lot of these other issues that are currently huge issues, they all go away, don't they?
Some will, absolutely. But it'll help them with grounding a little bit. It'll helps them reestablish roots, which is very, very important to their mental health, as it is for anybody in their mental health, not just veterans. So I think it'll go a long way towards welcoming our veterans back from the current conflicts and making sure that they're treated fairly. We still have a lot of veterans left over from Vietnam, for example, who have some of whom been homeless for years, and we're still trying to get as many of them housed as possible. and to make sure that they're getting their medical care as quickly as possible, because many of them, for example, Hether also goes to Guerneville on the second Thursday of every month, as we do here in Sonoma, but she's over there talking to some of the veterans who've been homeless for years.
So on the second Thursday of the month, it's Guerneville, but on the fourth Thursday of the month, you're here in Petaluma?
I am not the social worker that usually comes. I'm covering that person. It's another Head Vash social worker, and she is here every fourth Thursday.
So what services are available on the fourth Thursday of the month?
Okay, well, basically we'll sit down with the veteran, whoever's coming in, and we'll help them to identify their issues and to assess those issues, and then we'll make recommendations on who to talk to, who to contact to help resolve the issues. We can't solve their problems themselves, but we can tell them who can solve the problem. That's our objective in life. And so, and even go so far as to reach out to the provider and tell them that we've identified this person, and to make sure that the provider knows who they are and can reach them and can help them with whatever issues they might be talking about. We'll get a lot of veterans who come in, be recommended by Hether and her associates at the VA clinic, veterans who have got themselves into minor financial scrapes, default on rent, utilities, whatnot, and they get behind on their payments, and other issues, and we'll try to find donations to help them through their temporary problems. We can't solve their lifestyle and total life problems, but we try to keep them up and running as best we can, so that they can better solve their own problems.
All right, so it's Vet Connect. That's the name of the organization. They're here in Petaluma at the Veterans Building, located right near the bowling alley in Petaluma on Petaluma Boulevard. And they're here on the fourth Thursday of the month from noon to the afternoon.
Till 3 in the afternoon.
So 12 noon to 3 o'clock in the afternoon for all the veterans to come down, ask your questions, and a qualified person is going to help you. And we want to thank you, Colonel, for being with us today.
Thank you. We appreciate it. We invite all of the veterans in Petaluma to take advantage of the services that we have to offer here. We're here, and we're anxious to make sure that they get the benefits that they've earned.
And Hether, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we want to remind you folks, really do support our troops. Maybe you can make a tax-deductible contribution to Vet Connect. Let's find a home and housing for the vets, and if the veterans have questions that are in need of answer, you can talk confidentially to a veteran between noon and 3 o'clock here at the Veterans Memorial Building in Petaluma on the fourth Thursday of the month. I'm David Glass, the Mayor of Petaluma, and from the Vets Building, it's been nice talking to you.